Shall we play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. So glad to have you along. And today we're going to get into a topic, genre, whatever, that is one of my main things that I like to get into, but I don't cover it as much on the show as other topics, and that is horror movies. What we're going to do today is we're talking with Aaron B. Koontz, and he is the CEO and founder of Paper Street Pictures. And one of the main things we're going to be talking about today is there's a wonderful new movie out there. I know it's on Shudder. It may be available in other places as well, called Scare Package. And I saw this recently, and I was talking online about how much I enjoyed it. And Aaron, I think, liked or chimed in on one of my things. And I said, man, I loved your movie. Would you like to come on the show? And he said, yes. So here he is. I really appreciate it. But Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners? Let them know, what you do, not only as a CEO and founder of Paper Street Pictures, but with Scare Package and your movies. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, again, thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
I'm regularly on Twitter looking at the reactions of people, which normally would be scary, but actually on this movie it's been pretty positive. So
Good.
That's actually a fun thing.
Good.
And because I like to see what people are saying, and I want them to know that I see it and I appreciate it. So we try to engage, and I think that's what led to this. But look, I went to Full Sail University in Orlando, film school, and I just knew I wanted to make movies. I mean, I'm a cinephile first and foremost.
Right.
I loved horror films because they were kind of the forbidden fruit, and I wasn't really allowed to watch them as a kid. And so growing up, it became this fun exploration for me to dive into. And in 2012, I started a company with just my friends. We were making short films, commercials, stuff like that, music videos. And we made our first feature in 2016, came out in 2017 in theaters, called Obscura. It's a psychological thriller that we released with Universal. And then that was a really tough experience for a variety of reasons, which we can get into if you like. But I'm proud of the film. It just wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be, and for a number of reasons. And we decided to make this little love letter to horror that was just get my friends together and some people that we admired and wanted to work with, and do this horror comedy anthology, Scare Package, that's just kind of making fun of horror while bear hugging it at the same time, and the tropes and the things that we love. And was honestly probably the most fun I've ever had making a film. And it's just been this unbelievable journey. But we, my company kind of specializes on unique genre mashups. So we try to do not just straight horror or not just straight comedy or straight whatever. We want to do just different variations. So we had a psychological thriller that was really, really weird and kind of played head games on you. And then this is a horror comedy. Now I've also made a horror Western that's coming out later. And then we're even working on a horror sports movie, so
Right.
So it's fun. I mean, horror is one of the through lines that we like to play in. But I mean, I love documentaries. I love, I just, like I said, I'm a cinephile. But yeah, so I run this company. We've got, some folks that are in LA. The majority of us are in Austin, Texas. And yeah, it's just my friends, and we make movies, and we've had to teach ourselves kind of a lot of stuff for how to do this, even coming out of film school, how to get them made, and how to raise the money and all that. And it's been one hell of a journey. And now it's fun to have, a movie out with another one coming that folks are responding to, and talk about it, and, talk about movies.
Well, and that's, an interesting thing. You mentioned several interesting things in there, but I think a lot of people don't understand, or they think they understand until they have to deal with it, the financial aspect to the creative industry. In a lot of ways, people see movies as just another investment scheme. Not scheme sounds wrong, but they just see it as another place to invest their money. I've heard tales of people, producers and stuff, flying, making all kinds of private jet flights all over the country on December 31st because they're trying to get people to commit money, for the tax purposes before the end of the year and all that kind of thing. So And then if you get a lot of money from somebody, you can be somewhat beholden to them. So, which can be very frustrating in a creative endeavor. So.
Well, yeah, and actually, I would not even argue with the word scheme, because there are so many people who use film as a way of creating multi-level marketing crap. I mean, there are so many people, because movies can cost anything. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Like, the range of what a movie can cost, you can make a movie for $50,000 and you can make a movie for $500 million, right? So it's a very ripe ground for people to do money laundering.
Exactly.
Actually.
Yeah.
And,
or tax losses, tax write-offs.
Well, I mean, look, there's positives in the tax write-off stuff that can be utilized, and we do take that the best we can, as we should. But I mean, there's just a lot of crooks that are out there that do stuff and like, oh, sorry, the movie never got made, or we couldn't finish it for a reason. And then next thing you know, they were paying themselves a salary to develop, quote unquote, the movie. And so we just, I've seen firsthand so many aspects of this where I've gotten whiffs of people who like promises of a lot of money, and it turns out they don't too on the other side. So they just kind of want to, rub shoulders and be able to, talk to someone about this world and act like they're part of it.
Right.
So it's, the financial aspect is unbelievably difficult. I mean, I left a very lucrative job to full-time become a filmmaker. And even though we're successful, I'm not making nearly as much money as I did in tech in that world. But that's okay, because this is all I wanted to do, and I'm so much happier as a result of it. It's it's a minefield out there. It's tough.
I believe it. And I think that, a lot of people, they'll be like, why didn't that movie get made? Or why did that movie come out that way? Or I think if people really saw how the sausage gets made, despite best intentions, they would be astounded by how many good movies we do get. I mean, because it's hard, man.
It's a miracle. There's a phrase that it's a miracle any movie that gets made, and it absolutely is. Yeah. It is so unbelievably hard. It's also completely changed my perspective on movies, because I'll watch a movie and it used to be like, well, that's stupid. Like, why the hell did they do that? That makes no sense. But then you don't understand the amount of decisions that were made in a 5-second span where all this shit hit the fan and there was no possibility of making this work the right way, and they just had to salvage it the best they possibly could. And it's like, well, that's the best that was available because this actor couldn't do this, and this generator broke at this time, and these things happened there, and there's no money to move to the next day. And it's like, okay, well, now you got to make a scene work. I mean, on my horror western, Appel Door, I mean, in the ending of the film, there's a moment where a person's like covered in blood. And so, but I had them going into this like blood pit, but then we had to build the blood pit. We had to do all the logistics of that, hire the water crew, hire the safety crew, hire the stunt people. But then it flooded, and the blood pit got flooded with the normal water. It didn't have the lining in it, and there were snakes in the pit.
Oh my goodness. So
we couldn't shoot it. So SAG and our stunt people were like, we can't shoot it, which we shouldn't have been able to. So I was like, okay, well, I can't do the blood pit now, but I've already shot the ending of the movie because we shoot out of order. And the ending of the movie, they're covered in blood.
Right.
So now it's like, okay. And I literally have one day to come up with how to make this happen. Now, we were dealing with supernatural aspects, so we had it rain blood. And that, but so that seems like an easy fix. But then no, you got to get a water truck the night before. We were in Guthrie, Oklahoma. We're driving 15 miles in every direction to get every little piece of like red food coloring that existed in the entire like Tri-County area, literally. Yeah. And it just became this unbelievable ordeal to make happen the next day. And then people now watch the movie like, and I just laughed because it was like, oh, cool. Blood, like it rained blood. That's cool. And like, I'm like, oh my God, do you have any idea?
Yeah, do you have any idea what led to that? Yeah.
Do you have any clue? Like how hard that was to make that happen?
Yeah, movies are, I mean, I the more I learn about how movies are made, the more it just stresses me out thinking about all of the project management and engineering and problem solving that has to occur constantly and under strict rules of like unions and this and that. And I mean, it's crazy. So, but I'm not saying that the entire process is not fun. I know there's got to be some amazing moments making movies as well. But the amount of work and the amount of like I said, sausage getting made is just mind blowing to me the more I, read up on it. Unless you're guerrilla filmmaking, but even then that has its own challenges. And,
That has plenty of challenges. Trust me.
Yeah.
Even guerrilla filmmaking, Murphy's Law is a real thing. And it comes at you hard on a film set.
Right. I believe it. I've
Never been on 2-day shoots that are just nightmares. Like we could be, and look, I came from a project management background in tech. That's what I did. I was a project manager. I was a development manager. Like I worked with organizing people, keeping them on time. I'm very analytical with that. I'm very OCD with all of that. And you can plan everything as absolutely to a T, the best you possibly can. And then you get there and it's like, what the hell has happened? And it's complete disarray.
Right. Yeah. Well, Murphy's Law, of course, is whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And one of Murphy's laws is no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So, yeah, no plan. So, let me dial it back a little bit to get a little bit more insight into who you are. You're talking about you had a job in tech, and then you chased your dreams, which I respect. I've taken risky actions before because I'm like, I'm not going. It's that old adage. Or adage, nobody lays on the, deathbed and says, well, I wish I'd have pushed one more piece of paper in that corporate job. So I chase things I love to. But what was your first job? Like your very first job?
My very, very first job was I worked at Adventure Island when I was 16 years old, a water park. And I lied and said I was 18 so that I could work at the beer pavilion to give my friends beer.
So, yeah. So not only
fired from that job,
you got fired.
I got fired.
Did they catch you, or did something else happen?
It was a combination. Like they found out. I kind of talked my way out of that scenario when they found out that I wasn't 18, and then they, because even though it was 21 was the age, but like 18 to be able to serve or whatever there and or work in that pavilion. But then there was another thing that kind of came up with. I had to turn off the water to this particular slide. They were doing these tests. And I was 16. I was just a lazy 16-year-old. I just was not giving a shit about anything. And I didn't count the right nozzles. I turned off the water to the wrong slide when they were doing tests. I think they were cycling water, so like nobody like went down a dry slide like from 100 feet in the air. But had it kept going for maybe 15 more minutes, that could have happened. So
yikes!
Yeah, so I got let go.
You almost got to make nationwide headlines. So
right?
Yeah. And then so at some point you got into like the NE Tech from the what was it? Not The Office. What's that great Office Space? So you made it into your life became Office Space, and I'm taking a lot of creative license here. And you were working at NE Tech, and then you were like, you know what? I want to make movies. So how long had this burning desire been in you to make movies? If you're like me, and I think you are, you were told when you were growing up, you can't watch those horror movies. And you watched them anyway. I always snuck around and watched them anyway. I saw them all. In fact, I just rewatched the other day, The Boogans. And that was one of my big movies that I snuck and watched on HBO or something like that. And I'll tell you, I'm not lying. Like, I think I was 9 when Friday the 13th came out. And I caught it on HBO, like a friend and I watched it. And that movie flipping traumatized me, dude. I mean, it traumatized me. Like I had to sleep with
tattoo.
Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah.
It was not that anybody can see that at home, but it was So I was not allowed to watch horror films, but and I wasn't even allowed to have HBO. My grandmother got HBO for free. Like for some reason, it just came through on our television.
Right.
So, and my friend Sean Talley, who oddly enough is still one of my partners in my company today, like my oldest friend, he would give me tapes every now and then because he could watch stuff. And that was really how I watched a lot of horror films. But once I realized that HBO came to my grandmother's house, I went to like her guest bedroom and I even hooked up the VCR that was there, and I would bring a tape in every night and then overnight record. Because that back in those days, this is like mid 80s, late 80s, essentially what would happen is they would play all the art. They didn't play R movies during the day then, right? It was like, really PG, all was allowed during daytime. And then the horror movies would always play at night, generally speaking. And so I would record and I would get it back, and it was all horror films. And I watched them, and I put on the longest setting, the SLP setting.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Some people will know what we're talking about, where you could extend you could either record for 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours by varying the speed of the tape.
Yeah, and the quality goes down. So it gets a little more.
But when you're our age at that time, you don't care.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, just like you don't care. I don't care about the quality. I want the movie.
I was just these things were mind blowing to me that they existed. But I saw the first one I ever saw was Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, the Tommy McLaughlin one, and I saw that one, and that was like a zombie Jason. It's like more of a horror comedy in a way too. It's very over the top, and just really influenced me. But he scared me, like Jason scared me, and I had a reoccurring dream for, a really really long time, and I remember it so vividly right now. Where I'm running through the woods and Jason is chasing after me, walking, of course, but he's gaining on me.
But gaining on you, as he does.
Yeah, which is a joke we do in Scare Package.
Yeah, I want to remind people we're going to be talking about Scare Package, which is a love letter, but it also kind of sends the genre up and it deals with a lot of the tropes in the genre, too. But anyway, so Jason is chasing you, walking but catching up.
Yeah, but catching up. And then I find a tree, and it's one of those trees that's like hollow in the inside and has that opening on the ground. And for whatever reason, I was able to like fully fit underneath, and I crawled inside this tree, and then I'm looking through a hole, and I see him like looking for me. And then he comes right to the tree that I'm at, and then with an axe begins to chop down the tree with me in it.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah, right? Like that was.
But is it that exhilarating kind of scare? So like it's scary, but it's also kind of exhilarating, or was it just traumatizing?
Well, no, it was pretty traumatizing. Pretty traumatizing because I remember being like being afraid to go to sleep because I didn't want to have that dream.
Oh wow, okay, yeah,
because it happened multiple times. So it was a thing, but I loved the feeling of being scared. I wasn't really as scared watching Part 6. The movie that really scared me was Alien. Ridley Scott's Alien. Like that freaked me out. We went to my family, we would go, so on Sunday nights, we would go to like this church service. I grew up in a Christian home, go to this church service. And then after that, I would, if it was a Monday that was off, we would always like have a sleepover at one of my friends' houses. We'd go over after church and, rent a movie and get like a Tombstone pizza or whatever. And I remember going to my friend Matt White's house. And we'd always rent the same stuff. And like the most edgy thing we ever got was like Big Trouble in Little China or something like that. But I loved it, or Labyrinth. But I was really excited, and I wanted to see a friend of my friend Sean had talked about Alien. He's like, you need to see Alien, dude. Like, you need to see Alien. And I'm probably, 12, 11. And I'm begging to see Alien. And I might even have been younger than that, actually. But I'm begging to see Alien. And then finally, Matt's dad's like, look, I'll rent it. He goes to the grocery store to rent it, because that's what we did back then. Goes to the grocery store to rent it. And he's like, look, I'll do it, but I'm going to sit in the room. I'm going to watch you all when you're watching it. And if it's too bad, we'll turn it off. And he sat like behind us. I remember Matt and I just sitting there under the covers, just like shoulder to shoulder, like, oh my God, so tense, like freaking out. That was exhilarating. Like that was, I did not know that I could feel that way watching a movie. And it kind of there. And then Jaws would be the other one too. Jaws was exhilarating to me, but I never knew Jaws was a horror film. Like in my mind.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. It seemed like I guess when I was growing up, I didn't think of big monster movies or monster movies necessarily as horror films because they didn't always scare me. But I will say the scene where the head comes out of the bottom of the boat in Jaws, that I think that gave me nightmares. But the rest of the movie I didn't see as scary. So
when the Kidner kid gets killed on the raft, like that scared me. That absolutely scared me. Yep. And that original scene, which I wish I could see, they got deleted. The real attack that they filmed and then they cut out of the film because it was too graphic.
It was too hard. Or too hardcore.
So there's images of it and they're haunting. Jaws is straight up a horror film, by the way. It is. It
was a blockbuster, one of the first blockbusters, but it was a horror film. I literally remember, I can remember when Jaws came out, like it literally affected people not wanting to go into the water for a couple of years. Like literally, I remember that. Not like joking around, but seriously, people did not, it gave people a fear of the water.
Yeah.
It really did. and it was mind blowing. So you had Alien, that was a big one for you, and Alien's straight up a horror movie. It's got sci-fi elements, but that's straight up a horror movie.
It's horror.
It's even got a final girl. So and a final cat. It gets a final cat too, right?
And it has to jump out at you at some point too.
Yeah, good old Jonesy. So so you had Alien. And is there any other ones that you can remember that really kind of?
I mean, there were some like lower quality ones, like Shocker.
I remember Shocker, the guy that they electrocuted him and ended up in the TV or something like that.
Yeah, he gets killed for so he's on death row.
Yeah,
and he gets electrocuted in the electric chair, and then like he becomes this like electric killer kind of thing, and
right,
pretty cheesy. But
I saw that. I think I saw that in the theater, man.
It might have been Stephen King too. I think Stephen King might have wrote that. I don't recall, but
that one had a very distinctive heavy metal soundtrack. I remember that. I think it had a Megadeth song in it. So, in fact, I think there was a Megadeth video that. But anyway, I'm digressing big time. So that was what I remember.
Yeah, I mean, so there were a few. Just some random ones popped up. I remember The Shining showed up one night on one of those recorded ones from my grandmother's house. And that was weird. Like, that didn't scare me as much as I was so confused as a kid. Like,
oh, really?
What was going on. And but then there were a couple. I think that one also cut off. Like, I didn't have the full movie at the time, so I didn't even know what it was. But there were like one or two scenes that were really traumatizing. But yeah, but all of that was just different. Like, I just didn't know that I could watch movies and feel that way. I just didn't know that there was something unique and it was there. And because my mom was so adamant about I can't watch this stuff, it just made me want it more.
Right. And I grew up in the same way. It either made me want it more or I just went around it. I'm not saying, we should respect our parents. I get all that. But when you're 10, 11, 12, you're whatever. You're going to do whatever you can get away with for the most part.
Well, and being so adamant, I think really kind of makes them want it. So had my mom had been like, oh yeah, you can watch horror films if you want, I probably would have taken to them to some degree, but I highly doubt it would be where I am now as a horror filmmaker. I mean, I joke with my mom. I'm like, Mom, you created this.
You created the monster, Mom. Yeah. Well, and this is we could do an entire episode about this, but like science fiction and like some other genres, I'm one of the people that firmly believes that, and I'm not trying to put horror up on a pedestal and romanticize it and all that, but it serves a purpose in society like science fiction. You can have some discussions about things that you can't have if you're talking about it in their actual terms. But if you put it in a science fiction setting, then you can have very tough conversations or make points about current events that people will respond to. And horror, and I'm not saying every horror movie reaches this point, just like not every science fiction movie reaches a point of, being able to deal with social issues or whatever. But horror is cathartic in a lot of ways. It lets us deal with things in a safe kind of way, or get things out of our system or whatever. The classic example that I'm going to throw here is Godzilla. Japan gets the atomic bomb dropped on it, and then suddenly you get Godzilla, who's this big city-destroying monster made out of radiation. And the point goes even further, because the most recent Japanese Godzilla is Shin Godzilla, and that one is an allegory for the Fukushima, for the nuclear. It's an exact allegory for that. And so they'll put in every decade, they'll say the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 60s. You can look the horror movies from those decades in retrospect. Sometimes it's hard to see it when you're in the middle of it, but in retrospect, and you'll see what the fears of that time were of the people. So, so horror is not just, I want to see buckets of blood, or gore or whatever, although that's part of it, a part of the genre as a whole. But there's more going on with horror than just scaring people.
Oh my God. Look, you don't need to put it on a pedestal, but I will. I will gladly put horror on a pedestal because
go ahead.
I believe that horror is a way to speak to people in ways that they're not going to understand the message otherwise. I feel like it's a way to take, if you watch The Thing or you watch The Crazies, honestly, old John Carpenter in particular, there are political, sociological messages throughout that are permeating these stories that I think otherwise, and as a kid, I didn't know. I thought The Thing was just that cool movie about that dog that turned into a creature.
Right.
Right. But then you grow up and you really start to understand what this is about, of individuality and even like racism. And like, there's so much
There's
stuff
a lot going on in there. Yeah.
And especially, and I think it's also like a reflection of the climate politically, you know, and what's
absolutely.
going on. And people are kind of, you know, rebelling and creating that. And I think right now people are creating art in a similar way, you know, based on what's going on politically. So I think that horror has the really good horror, and actually just good film in general, has these through lines. They have these messages that can permeate. I mean, look, the last film I just made, The Pale Door, it's a horror Western. If you talk, when I go into a room and I pitched it to people, the basic log line, just to go on a slight diatribe here, is it's a group of cowboys that rob a train. The leader gets shot. The loot that they thought was going to be this gold, they open up the trunk and it ends up being a mysterious woman. And they're like, well, we have to hold up somewhere. We have to get this guy some help. She's like, look, if you take me to my town, I can get you help. They're skeptical, but he's hurting. So they follow to this and they go to this ghost town. There's a brothel that's there. They start to tend to the men, and then it ends up being a coven of witches. And the cowboys have to survive the night, you know, against this coven of witches. And it becomes this, you know, cowboys and witches kind of story or whatever. And that's a very high concept, like fun thing to talk about. People get excited when they hear, ooh, cowboys and witches.
Yeah.
And when I was in the room and I pitched it and we're raising money, that's what I focused on. But the movie is not about that. The movie is about hate, you know, begetting hate, and that, you know, fear creates this necessity to hurt others because you're put into this corner and you lash out. And it deals with the witches, like go back to the town of Salem and the persecution of them by these zealots and what happened. And then, you know, and then it's also a very personal story about my brother and I and us dealing with my father and like how we dealt with that and everything. And I wanted to tell this kind of story and about this gang of cowboys and like, why did they turn to a life of crime and like what happened and what were those triggers? And it really tries to examine this like nature versus nurture idea of like, are you bad inherently or did you learn this? And you learn hate, you know, hate is a taught thing. And so these witches at the end, we were doing marketing for it and they're like, oh, it's you know, the cowboys against evil witches. And I was like, no, they're not evil witches. Yeah, they're doing some bad things, but like there's something that we're trying to talk about here. So anyway, sorry, that's an aside.
No problem. I mean, that sounds fascinating. And that's your next movie to release from Paper Street Productions or Paper Street Pictures. And you said that's coming out in August?
Yeah, that's coming out in August. It'll be in select theaters, drive-ins, VOD, all that.
Okay. Do you think that it may be too early to know, but like currently, you know, Scare Packages on Shudder, and a lot of horror fans are going to Shudder right now for a big part of their horror. And I think Shudder's doing a pretty good job of content that covers multiple decades and multiple types of horror and that sort of thing. Do you think, is there any discussions right now that you would even be able to talk about that it would come to Shudder?
It will come to Shudder as well. Yeah.
Okay,
so
great.
It'll be exclusive. It'll be kind of, you know, on iTunes and theaters and all that stuff for a little while. And then later on in the year, I don't know the exact timing, nor did I know if I can actually say, but later on in the year, it will go to Shudder as well. Yeah. Okay.
So, I got one or two last general questions about horror movies and your background, and then we're going to talk about Scare Package. Cool. One of them comes from, I hang out on Facebook in the Joe Bob Briggs Drive-In Mutant Collective, which is one of my favorite groups to hang out in. And in fact, the only reason I know about Scare Package is because, well, I mean, I probably would have seen it on Shudder, but, you know, the premiere in Joe Bob's last Drive-In is what brought it to my attention. But Kelly Black from, you know, I told people I was going to be talking with you and ask me any questions, and I got a few here. But Kelly Black asked, what's the movie that sparked your interest? Like, is there one movie that you were like, okay, I want to become involved in film? Not like I'm enjoying this experience, but this is the movie that I knew that I wanted to be involved with movies.
Yes, there's a very definitive example of that. There are two. So to preface that a little bit before I get into the main film that was the catalyst, Jaws is the first. Jaws is like the 1A answer, right? Whereas, because as much as I was obsessed with that movie, I I couldn't understand, like I knew the shark wasn't real, but I couldn't understand like how do they do that? And like how was the camera underwater? Like just those things didn't make sense to me. And I'm like, well, they're on a boat. Like how do they make that when they're on a boat in the middle of the ocean? You know, in my head, like I just could not wrap my head.
So you were trying to reverse engineer the movie while you were watching it. Okay.
And I've always kind of been.
How old was this when you were doing this?
I mean, I'm like 10 years old.
And you're trying to reverse engineer the movie.
Yeah, I'm asking these questions. I remember asking these questions in class, you know, because I wrote a paper about Jaws. And then I learned, and somebody told me about Steven Spielberg, and I learned that this is the person who comes up with the ways to do that. And that like blew my mind that was a job. That was like a real thing. And I was like, whoa, that is interesting. But that got kind of beat out of me as a kid. Because then I was also told like, that's not something you can really do. That's not a real job. These are unbelievably, and even though it's true, it's still unbelievably rare to make a living as a director. But it was just like not feasible. And so I was a writer, and I decided I was going to go into journalism, and that was going to be my thing. But then, you know, later in life, I started to realize that was possible, and then went to film school. But what happened, so I had this passion that had kind of existed and really started with Jaws. And then in 1999, I was with my girlfriend and my girlfriend at the time and a couple of folks, and we went and saw Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia. Probably an odd one to hear from me talking about, but nonetheless, I'm watching that movie. 1999, I think, is one of the greatest years in the history of film. We can talk about that separately, but Magnolia was just this unbelievably important film to me where I watched it, and it's 3 hours and 7 minutes long, and I waited through all the credits. My friends left. I was crying. My friends left. I walk outside to this AMC Cinema 20 in the Regency Cinema 20 in Brandon, Florida. I walk outside, and my friends are like, hey, we're going to go, you know, grab food. And I'm like, I have to watch this again. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, I have to watch this movie again because I don't really know what happened, but it has profoundly moved me. And I'm not trying to get too pretentious or whatever, but there was just something about watching that movie and the experience of it and understanding, because it's all about all these disparate stories that kind of like culminate in this really unique way. And if you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it, but there's a very fantastical ending that happens to this drama. And I, to this day, I think it's some of the greatest pure directing craft ever done. I mean, that obsessed with it. And the movie ends on a look to Melora Walters, who plays Claudia Wilson Gator in the film. And it's a long push-in. John C. Reilly sits on the edge of a bed. I'm not giving it away. It's just a long push-in. And then she turns and she looks into the camera, and then she cries and gives this little smile. And she gives this half smile. And just saying that out loud, I just got chills because I think about what that meant to me.
Is that good, huh? I've never seen it. I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
I am obsessed with that movie. I have a tattoo of Magnolia, all this. So Melora Walters' look at the end of Magnolia was everything. And I went with my friends. My friends were like, what are you talking about? That movie was so weird. Like, why do you even care? And I'm like, I didn't know, like, it just made me, it reignited everything that was in me. I was trying to write on the side, and had movie ideas and stuff. And then I came back and I started writing a screenplay that wasn't good, but I was inspired to write something. And then I said, I'm going to film school. And I decided I was going to school it was journalism, but then I was also pre-med, another weird alternate reality. And was like, okay, I'm going to write and do this. Yeah, it's craziness, complete craziness in my life. And I left and decided to go to film school. And it was 100% because of watching that movie at that moment. Now that year also Fight Club came out. Right. And a number of other films that were really influential, like The Matrix and just
Matrix came out. Yeah, Matrix is for its time. Matrix is like Star Wars. If you weren't there when it came out, you don't understand how different it was. You know, I mean,
mind blowing.
It was totally. I'd never seen anything like it. You know, you can watch it now for the first time and be like, "Wow, that was really a cool movie." But it's just you don't. It's the zeitgeist of the time. You just don't understand how crazy The Matrix was. But I guess the Paul Thomas Anderson, that explains. In your publicity photo, you wear a Boogie Nights hat.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. And, you know, speaking of suspense and horror movies and all that scene where they're at that guy's house to rob him and he's throwing firecrackers. Do you remember what I'm talking about? That is one of the most tense.
You're describing the greatest scene, I think, in my lifetime in cinema.
That is
hyperbolic.
That has stuck with me as one. Like, I felt like I was on the couch with them. I was so tense and stressed out by that whole scene.
Throwing the firecrackers. It's Alfred Molina, and he's talking with Mark Wahlberg, John C. Reilly, Thomas Jane, and they're playing 99 Luft Balloons. That playing on the background, it's looping, and then and it's just there. And there's this absolutely perfect moment. And again, it's just why Paul Thomas Anderson is so damn good at what he does, where the camera kind of moves and it stops, and it sits on Mark Wahlberg, and for a solid minute, he has this blank stare on his face, really zoned out. And they just don't call cut. They let it go and let it be a thing. And you're just kind of like perfectly in this head of somebody who's so coked out and doesn't know what's going on, but also you can kind of see just the paranoia and then building up the courage, because right after that he stands up and he's like, we got to go, and they're going to rob him. Right. And it's like you're feeling, and the tension is just big.
I've never had any. I mean, there's been other powerful scenes in movies, but that one is probably the one that I connected the most with the stress and paranoia. I was I was like, But anyway,
Magnolia has a couple of those too.
I'm going to check it out. Yeah. I very vividly remember the movie poster because of that, the flower with like the faces in it or something like that. Yeah.
Magnolia,
I've never seen it. So I'll check it out. One last general question, and then we're going to Scare Package. What as a director, as somebody who puts movies together and produces them, what did you feel when, what's basically a horror movie, a thriller movie, but also a South Korean movie that's subtitled, won the Oscar, Parasite? How did that make you feel? Do you think that like the limits are opening up, or did you think it was like, well, that's kind of a one-off, or what I mean?
Literally jumped up and yelled in happiness when it won. So keep in mind too, I was at one of the earliest screenings of that movie in Austin, Texas for Fantastic Fest, where they gave us like the glasses that they used to like black out their eyes and all that. And I saw Parasite, and and I even saw Perk Talk, and it just was for Bunch of Talk. It was. That movie is absolutely amazing. I think it's actually one of the best movies of the past few years in all of cinema. And the fact that, a foreign language film won, I think is a wonderful, wonderful thing, because look, it is the best movie. Like that's what it needs to be. It just,
the Oscars, and they rarely are, let's just be honest.
Yeah, it's the first
but the Oscars rarely are the best movie.
It's the first time in a long time that I think they actually got Best Picture right.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
But given the genres you could put that movie in, did that encourage you as a horror filmmaker?
Yeah, because he considers himself a horror filmmaker.
Yeah.
So he made The Host, and he made horror film. I mean, that's what he does. So this is very much a genre film, So yeah, a genre film winning the Oscar. I mean, now granted, nobody's going to call it horror, and I understand that. You can make that argument. It's fine. Right. I think it's got plenty of horror elements. But then people also don't want to call Silence of the Lambs horror, and that's horror too.
That's a horror movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of people, whether it's fair or not, they feel like if you throw the horror label on it, then it loses credence, or so, or whatever. But the same thing used to happen.
Elevated genre. They created that term out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It needs to be elevated. Come on. It's garbage.
Well, I mean, I can remember when comic book movies were really looked down on, and then they dominated and did some really good storytelling for like a decade. So anyway, I want to move us over to Scare Package, because that is the main reason that I reached out to you. I'll kind of put it, I'll let you introduce Scare Package the way you would want to put it. Now, Slash Film, they described it as a hilarious and smart horror anthology, and they said it's 7 segments and a wraparound. And if people don't know, a wraparound is kind of a narrative structure that goes around and pulls everything together, each involving a different horror subgenre and tacking on overused genre tropes on purpose. So it's a lot of fun, and it's smart, it's well made, it's meta, and it's self-referential, but in a way that's totally enjoyable, and you never feel like that it's disrespecting the genre that it's loving on. So how would you describe Scare Package?
Oh, that was pretty. I thought it was pretty damn good.
Well, okay then.
So yeah, that was pretty good. I mean, yeah, it's definitely, it's meant to be a lot of fun. You know, if you don't like meta, you're probably not going to dig it. That's fine.
Meta. It's very meta. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, look, the original title of it was Tropes, and the concept was that each segment was a different horror trope that we were going to subvert. But look, I had people who, you had to be a real horror fan for me to hire you to do a segment, right, on this. Like you had to really be able to illustrate to me the rules of horror, the tropes of horror, the cliches of horror, and how you could subvert that, understand that without punching down. I don't want it to be about punching down.
Now, define punching down. I'm not familiar with that. What does that mean?
I just mean like you're making fun of it as if.
Oh, I got you. Like literally punching down on it.
Yeah, look how stupid this is.
I got you.
You know, like it's beneath me, so we're better than this, so we're gonna make. And it's not, like, we love it, but we can also be, you know, self-deprecating and aware of like some of the faults that we've had, and so the idea was to take those and have fun with them. And I think, you know, great comps for it that we really fell in love with are like Tucker and Dale versus Evil and Cabin in the Woods, and movies like that just, you know, have a lot of heart, but then also understand. And that was a big thing, like horror with heart. We just wanted it to have, you know, something to say about horror, but then also just have fun. I mean, this is not, we were talking about how horror can be this platform to really, you know, explore these, you know, socio-political, you know, times and whatnot. Scare Package is not that movie, you know. Scare Package is
it's a love letter. If I had to describe anything, it's a love letter to the horror movies of the 80s. I mean, it's not just the 80s, but the 80s was when so much of this got cemented into our pop culture. And before I forget to mention this, the music,
Cool.
I love. In fact, I bought the soundtrack off of Apple, I think, iTunes. There's several places you can get it. And I've literally been humming to myself happily, you know, like everybody dies in the end, or however that goes. I know I'm getting it totally wrong, but everybody dies in the end. And I'm just happily singing that. And, you know, and the Rad Chad, the Rad Chad's Horror Emporium theme is so dead on perfect. I mean, there's so much good the final kill, the final kill, the final kill. There's so much good music in that is it's music that stands on its own, but is also really loving on a lot of the old like synthesizer music, you know, from the 80s and that kind of stuff. So who produced that? I mean, because
that's so amazing. First of all, thank you so much for doing that. So Alex Cuervo is my composer. So one of the things, even though it's an anthology, one of the rules that we had was there was going to be cohesive tissue between all of the segments. So we kind of, I you know, kind of look at it like I was a showrunner with Cameron Burns, who's my co-creator of this. And we kind of showrun what each of these episodes were. And then I wrote and directed the core story that kind of ties it all together in the big finale. But yeah, Alex Cuervo is a composer of mine. He's also my composer for The Pale Door, close friend. I think it's just so unbelievably talented. And yeah, we wanted this kind of, look, I think a lot of movies were doing these Carpenter synth scores, you know, here in the late 2000s, you know, 2010, 2020 range, but they were a little derivative, and we wanted to have something that kind of felt new, but still kind of tied into that pastiche that was there. And then also find ways that each segment can kind of feel a little unique, but then still have, there's like some instruments and things that kind of repeat throughout.
Right.
So
I noticed that. Yeah. It ties together. It's like I said, anybody who likes synthesizer soundtracks, even if you don't see the movie, you should buy the soundtrack. It's really, really.
Yeah, it's on Shore Records, and we have a vinyl that's coming soon too as well.
Oh, I'll get that, because actually I have a I don't know. You're not supposed to call it a record player anymore. I think you're supposed to call it a turntable or something. I don't know.
Whatever.
But yeah, I get a little bit of vinyl, and I usually only buy the vinyl that was made for that time period that vinyl would have been, but I'll break that rule for the Scare package soundtrack. Because if I could get that with those little beautiful hisses and pops and all that in there, I love that part of vinyl. But anyway, totally digressing. So it's 7 segments. Each segment is a short horror comedy film. Some of it's outright horror, but it's got a strong comedy theme as well. For people who like gore, you're going to get some gore. It's not purely gore, but if you're a horror movie fan, there's something in here that you're going to smile at and connect with, because each genre, each segment, and I'll stop saying segments, each short film that's part of the total anthology is a different trope within the horror genre, from slashers to I don't know, what tropes would you say you cover?
Well, look, I think one of the best ways to explain this is the film opens on a big sound effect, and then you're in our cold open, and it is our cold open, and the title of it is Cold Open,
right,
about cold opens. And then when that cold open ends, and it's about a guy who just lives in cold opens and just wants to make it to the rest of the movie and wants to be a big part of the movie. Yeah,
he wants to have he sets up the movies. Like, he's the guy making sure that when they open the chest in the attic that the possessed relic is in there.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah, or cutting the power. He's the guy that goes and cuts the power.
Yeah, cut the power out. So all the things that happen, those inciting incidents that set a horror film off, he's the person who's hired to do that. And he's like, I just want to be something more in a horror film. And then he kind of accidentally creates one himself. And that's Cold Open. But then when that ends, you see a script, and it's somebody who's reading Cold Open. And then you're in a car and you're like, what's going on? And then you learn that this guy was reading the script to this person in the car, which is our lead character, Rad Chad. Jeremy King. And then Jeremy King's first line is, I don't know about a movie, talking about a movie within a movie. That's just confusing.
Right.
So that sets up a world right there that if this is not your thing, like, we're basically telling you, like, get out now.
Right.
We're going for one hell of a ride.
And that does touch on one of the questions I had, like, who is your target audience? I mean, obviously horror lovers, but
it's just horror. It's just the people who, especially the ones who would argue about, who would win between Jason and Freddy, and what were the best kills in this Friday the 13th series,
right.
and what is, because, and it's also people who just want to have a fun escape. Like, my first film, Camera Obscura, was a downer. Like, it's a really depressing movie, and it ends on a very depressing note. And, it's just like, I was like, man, I kept getting up to do Q&As and we would do screenings. And I was like, I just didn't have the energy. And I was like, you know what? I just want this movie to end and people just be smiling. I want to see an ear-to-ear grin,
right,
and just have fun. It's made for midnight audiences that are laughing. And,
right.
But it's a comedy. Like, I'd say even before horror, it's a comedy.
It's comedy and then horror. I mean, it's definitely, but it does have good horror moments in it. And it has unsettling things like the mask or the lollipop, whatever, the sucker that they get from that convenience store. I mean, that's a very unsettling. If you really analyze that segment, that short film, that's very unsettling. There's some creepy stuff going on, but I got to touch on Rad Chad. So, and I think you've already answered one of the questions I had, which was, how did the movie get written? Who chose what for the segments? So it sounds like Paper Street Pictures wrote the movie and produced the movie, and then you hired people to direct certain segments. It wasn't like they pitched you segments to be in it, or
no, it's a little more. It's an amalgamation of the two. So we had a number of tropes we wanted people to look at, and then we had some directors that we really liked that we thought would be good fits that had the horror comedic timing, and then also knew how to use practical effects. So you talk about the gore. We wanted this to be like the thing, and the Friday the 13th movies that had these big gore effects, because those were fun, but done in a very fun way.
Right.
And so paying you as a director to be able to pull those off, is something, right? You have to know how to do those gags. So we had to find the right people, but we had a list of tropes that we wanted people to work with. And then we said, look, we want you to direct one. And pitch us, like, here's the kind of things, here's some things to choose from.
So there was a list of tropes, but then they had some wiggle room inside the trope.
Yeah. Well, no, they had freedom to write their version, but we developed it with them. So we were having regular conversations. I'd be like, you know what, actually, and there were times where I was like, nope, actually that joke exists in another one, so we can't use that. And we flat out rejected many submissions that came through because it doesn't really fit the vibe for one reason or another. And and then we kind of show ran that, and then we used a lot of the same producing teams to make that happen. Some of the same makeup effects teams, the same composer as we discussed, the same sound designer, the same colorist. So things that can kind of allow them to have their unique visions for these talented filmmakers, but then also kind of, intertwine them within this bigger story at the same time.
And to give people an idea who haven't seen the movie, I'm specifically trying not to go into the content of the different segments, short films, because I want people to just sit back and enjoy them as they happen. But just to give an idea of sending up a trope, Rad Chad describes himself. He identifies himself as the Randy archetype from Scream. Another one is because he's going around the room and pointing out to everybody, there's all this collection of people and he's pointing out, well, you're the final girl and you're this and you're that. And I'm the Randy because I have all the horror movie knowledge. There's another scene where they literally have a lady on a treadmill running and they're tracking her progress. And they have a Jason type character behind her chasing her on another treadmill. And right when she's about to get away, she always falls. And the people are checking off the checkbox and go, because they have a little computer algorithm that says, well, if she's running this fast and he's running that fast, and it shows on this projection how far away she's getting. And as soon as she hits a certain point, she falls. And people with clipboards are like, oh, fascinating. And they just check off. So they're really having fun with it. But so I want to take it back to Rad Chad. I really liked Rad Chad, and I really liked the Video Emporium. One, because it took me back to the 80s and 90s. But two, anybody who's into horror movies knows somebody like Rad Chad. Or anybody who's into geekdom at all knows a Rad Chad. And, I don't know if you have any plans for this or not, but I would totally watch a Rad Chad series. Because it doesn't matter what happened to him. I mean, you could develop like a 15 or, like a season of 15 or 30 minute episodes around that Video Emporium concept. And I would watch the full out of that. I just want you to know that. I really, really, really liked.
Well, you should tell Shudder that you would do that, because we may or may not have a whole idea for very similar to what you're talking about.
Okay, I'll watch Rad Chad. I mean, to me, it seems self-made for a ongoing series of, like a customer comes in and he's like, oh, you got to watch this. And then it takes you into the segment or because, The idea is, it's like an episodic, 30-minute episodic where essentially half of the movie is taking place with Rad Chad, whether at his home or at his video store. Right.
And then there's one segment per episode.
Right.
And but then we would go into it in a unique way. So it's not just every episode at 15 minutes in, a tape gets put in. It's a unique way of like going in and out, because we try to do that in the movie itself, try and go in and out the same way. So we have Scare Package presents Rad Chad's Horror Emporium,
Dude, so, I would watch the full out of that. I would really enjoy it. Whoever, I don't know if Rad Chad was your creation. I don't know who wrote him.
Yeah, it was mine.
Great writing, and the actor nailed it.
Yeah, Jeremy King. King, he's great. He's wonderful.
What was his name again for the listeners?
Jeremy King.
Perfect. I mean, he's perfect, and it was just one of those, like some characters come along and seem perfectly developed the minute they pop on screen, and other characters take a while to develop. I feel like he was perfectly like right out of the, boom, nailed. Speaking of characters in the movie, and I don't want to tell in what form or fashion, but John Bloom, Bob Briggs is in the movie. How hard was that to coordinate?
Actually at the time, it'd be much harder to coordinate now. But at the time, it was not that hard at all, because this is prior to the Shudder resurgence. This is prior to him coming back and breaking the internet and all the.
So this was all done before. I mean, so how long ago did you film and put it all together?
Well, when we filmed it, he had already at that point he had announced the Shudder thing, and it was about to air. So he had already filmed some of those. It was about to air that. So
a couple of years ago, roughly.
The first marathon that he had.
Right.
So, but I want to say we shot in like August or so of 2018. So we shot that piece, because this was all shot, in segmented pieces over the course of like 18 months.
Okay.
Because we wanted to curate, we wanted to shoot something and then kind of customize how that connected to the next piece. so they didn't feel so, disconnected. Right. But look, I'm just a diehard Joe Bob fan. I grew up watching Monster Vision because, as we alluded to, I wasn't allowed to watch horror films, but I could get TNT. So TNT was a way for me to watch, even though they were edited, I could watch some horror films, some weird movies. And that was a lot of fun for me. So that became, part of my exploration. And also, to give Joe Bob credit, he was one of the people that first kind of enlightened me to these films have something more to say than what's there. And even though sometimes he made fun of them, but he talked about things that I didn't even realize were going on in movies.
Really insightful. I mean, the guy is really, really not just smart, but he knows how to articulate it. And he nails Joe Bob. Like, it wasn't until recently, within the past few years, that I knew that Joe Bob and John Bloom were two different people. I mean, he nails Joe Bob like so dead on. The first time I was ever introduced, I was in the military in the early 90s. I was overseas, and the Stars and Stripes newspaper carried the Joe Bob column. So I didn't even know anything, I just loved this has multiple aardvarking and this and that and the other. And anyway, well, he did a great job in the movie, and I can only assume, I'm not talking about Joe Bob, I'm talking about John Bloom, that when Rad Chad interacts with Joe Bob, that John Bloom sometimes is thinking that, right? When these horror fans come up.
100%.
Yeah, such a great scene. But anyway, they had a lot of fun. I will say some of the funnier lines were things that Joe Bob, whatever, we talked about and found ways to kind of, because he wanted to make fun of him. Right.
So he's like, let's lean into this, and that was written in the script to make fun of him, but without giving away what's said. But like there are things
he leaned into it stronger.
That were very, that I was like, oh, go for it. And as a director, I love when actors they're like, oh, no, this is what my character would do. And I'm like, great, lean into it. Let's go have fun. And it was an absolute blast. He followed me on Twitter because I was a fan.
Nice.
And, just before, anything had really happened, I just was making other movies. And then I messaged him on Twitter, and he got back to me, and he's like, oh, wow, I haven't acted in a long time, And I'm like, well, I have a plan. And I want you in it because, and then what was crazy is I had a lot of people who had no idea who Joe Bob was. They read the script and they're like, I don't think it's going to be this big moment for you.
It was, trust me. There's so many people out there because your target audience is horror lovers.
That was my whole thought.
Yeah.
That was my thought. It's like, look, even if it doesn't land, like if you don't know who he is, let's say you don't know who he is, it can still be funny because we can establish that the Jeremy King character, likes him and kind of has an homage to him, and there's a similarity in some way. So we knew that could still be funny regardless. And my girlfriend at the time did not know, and I was like, hey, just read this and tell me. She thought it was still funny, but then the hardcore horror fans are like, I mean, it happened in theaters when we played at festivals. People literally jumped out of their seats.
Yeah, it was great, and it was great because I was when I first caught Scare Package. I was busy working or something, and I was watching like the Facebook and Twitter stream on the last drive-in, and people started reacting to Joe Bob's presence, and but I didn't realize what was all going on. And then by the time I got over to the live marathon that night, or the live episode, Mike had just shown up again at the end, and I'll just leave it at that, at the car. And then I was like, well, that seems kind of neat. But then, and I got to give you one final, because we're about to wrap up, but I got to give you one final huge compliment. Your credits were so great. They sold me on, I'm absolutely going to go back and watch this movie.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Because it captured the vibe. It's VHS. It's that 80, your movie poster with the little disembodied hand and the VHS tapes. But the credits, I was like, the music and the vibe of the VHS tapes for each segment, I was like, I'm watching this movie.
Well, one of the problems with anthologies is you don't know who directed each segment.
Right.
And I didn't want to stop and give credits in the middle of that movie. Right. So this, I wanted to have a unique way to do it, but also still, again, pay homage to like what this is really about. So I'm really glad. Sorry, there's fireworks going on outside.
Are there really?
Yeah.
But it's Friday night, July 3rd when we're...
Yeah.
Friday night, July 3rd is when things went bad on Return of the Living Dead.
That is 100% true. And Tarman started to come out. That's
right.
Yeah. But yeah, the credits were, so I actually take a lot of pride in credits. I like doing elaborate credit sequences because they're fun. So The Pale Door also has a really elaborate credit sequence. But yeah, I love, that was so much fun to make. And yeah, because I'm it's people are like, well, you're spending a little money on that. I'm like, it's so cool.
I think it's worth it because it adds to the total, I don't know, branding of the movie, if you will. It kind of puts an end cap on the mood and the tone of the movie. But I also hate when I watch TV now and they minimize or zoom the credits and you don't get to see the people that were involved. So I love it when people do engaging credits that keep you watching. But yeah, that, I was probably going to, I was going to watch it anyway because I saw that Joe Bob was in it and people were having fun reacting to the movie. But the credits was like, I've absolutely got to watch this the minute that it drops on Shudder.
Cool.
So it dropped like the following Thursday and I watched it immediately. So
yeah, my hope is that if you watch those credits, you also get the feeling that if we're paying this much attention to getting the detail in the credits right, then maybe you think about the attention we paid to the film itself. Because there's so many Easter eggs, so many hidden things in the background that if you pause or you read this, they're just all over the place. And that was fun for me as a kid. So that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I love doing that stuff. Like, trying to like, oh, I'm pretty sure that was from whatever. And, even the colors that were chosen for Rad Chad's convertible top. Yeah. Immediately I'm like, and that reminded me of, there was a segment from Freddy's Nightmares a long time ago that reminded me of, there was some blanket or something that was his. I know. I'm digressing.
Well, the end of Nightmare on Elm Street is the convertible top coming up over with those colors. So that is the actual ending. So we're paying homage to that.
To that ending. Okay. Yeah. I caught the colors, but I didn't catch I didn't catch that. There's a lot in there. I got to wrap this up, but before I do, a couple more questions. And folks, I want to remind people, we're talking about Scare Package, which is a really fun movie. I know it's on Shudder, but I had another question. And I got two questions here, more questions from the Drive-In Mutant Collective, the Joe Bob Briggs Drive-In Mutant Collective on Facebook. David Linenhawk asked, I don't want to forget to ask this. He said, how did you decide on how many segments, because the film has 7 segments and a wraparound narrative. How did you land on 7 segments?
Very OCD of myself in that I watched every anthology I possibly could. I created a spreadsheet of the pros and cons. And it's interesting because Joe Bob made fun of us. He's like, oh, there's so many segments. Normally an anthology is this, but modern anthologies are actually, ABC's of Death has, 26 segments or whatever.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So there's some that have, 10, 12, Tales of Halloween was a very popular one. And
that was a great, I think that one had a lot of segments.
It did.
I enjoyed Tales of Halloween a lot.
Yeah. Holidays had more. So there's a number that have had. So I looked at all of those and I tried to pick what I thought was, we also wanted the times for each segment to be different. So they weren't all 10 minutes or they weren't all 20 minutes or whatever. So you didn't really know when they were going to end. And you didn't really know how, we just wanted to keep everything a little off balance and feel fresh. So yeah, that was curated. That was specially curated about, here's what we need. Here's how
it was data driven. It was data driven tropes.
Completely. Yeah. Everything in this movie.
Yeah, well, that speaks to your background as a project manager. So you're gonna gather data to drive the decisions that are made. So, and we know that it's on Shudder, SHUDDER. I would describe Shudder, if people aren't familiar, as the Netflix of horror. There's and suspense and revenge movies and that sort of thing. And speaking
promo code Shut-In, you get a free 30-day trial. So
is it SHUTIN?
Correct.
Okay, just all one word. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, one final question from the Mutant Collective on Facebook, Andrew Byard, and this is a nice follow-up to the Shudder discussion. He says, curious if there will be a Blu-ray or a DVD release, or even better, a VHS limited edition release. And along with that, is there any other way people can watch the movie right now other than on Shudder?
Well, there's not any other way to watch other than Shudder at this time for folks that are in North America.
Okay.
Overseas, there's other ways. The UK is also just Shudder, but it will eventually be on iTunes, some other places as well. But yeah, we did a deal with Shudder so it could be exclusive to them, so they can get people to subscribe to watch it. And again, free 30-day trial, and then it's like $5 a month.
I've been on Shudder for.
It's the best.
Yeah, for quite a while now. Yeah,
we get no money off the people subscribing to Shudder, right? They've already paid us.
Right, you got your deal, right?
I think everybody should subscribe to Shudder because it's amazing. And they're also really, really great people who are really trying to do this too.
Well, yeah, they're not just trying to make a buck off the genre. They're boosters of the genre. They're creating original content. They're introducing classics of the genre. I just watched The Burning for the first time.
Oh, amazing.
Had never seen The Burning. And I just watched it a couple of days ago and that's interesting because that was a slasher movie made before, very much in the vein of like the first Friday 13th. Mm-hmm. But it was made before a lot of the tropes were set. There was no final girl. There were two final dudes, you know? So
that's one of Savini's best effects too.
It was amazing, dude. And I'm not going to ruin this for people who haven't seen it, but when they're on the raft and they go up to the canoe, was traumatic. And I'll just leave it at that. That was one of the most insane scenes I've ever seen in a slasher movie. That was crazy.
To pull that off too at that time period, what they're able to do, it's amazing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you know, and you got, I don't know. Anyway, The Burning was amazing. So, and I wouldn't have seen that without Shudder. You know, they have original content. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Shudder, but you can catch
DVD, Blu-ray. Yes, so we do have a DVD and Blu-ray that are coming out. It's supposed to be in October. So I'm actually working on all the materials. We have an entire segment that did not appear in the movie that's available. We'll have a deleted scene. We have an alternate ending that's called, we actually labeled it on the Blu-ray, the not nearly as good alternate ending. I think it's called because it just is not nearly as good.
Right. And that's what people will call it. Oh, there's an alternate ending that isn't as good.
It's just not, that's why we did a new ending because I didn't like it. And then we've got a blooper reel that's really fun. We've even got a commercial of Rad Chad's Horror Emporium that he made as well.
I love fake nostalgia commercials. I love them so much. Have you seen, there's a found footage movie out there called the K something Halloween special where it's like an hour-long broadcast of a news. Oh,
yes.
And they have all these wonderful fake nostalgia commercials in there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, okay. Well, I want to draw us to a close. Thanks again so much for your time. Folks, you can check out Scare Package now, which is just a really fun love letter to horror movies. And then the movie that's coming out in August, the horror western, what was the name of that again?
That's called The Pale Door that I made with Joe R. Lansdale, who wrote Bubba Hotep.
Oh, yeah, I know Joe R. Lansdale. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a creator with it. His son's a writer with me. It's just got a bunch of – it's the biggest movie we've ever done, and we're really, really excited about that.
Yeah, I'm even more intrigued now with Joe R. Lansdale being involved. So, okay, so here's what I have to do, Aaron. Folks, we've been talking with Aaron B. Koontz, who is a CEO and founder and a writer and movie director and all that, producer at Paper Street Pictures. You can go to their website, just look up Paper Street Pictures, and there's a list of movies they've been involved with. But I have to do this, Aaron. I always end Shane Plays Geek Talk with the bad joke of the week. So, and put your emphasis on bad. This is bad. Let's just get it out of the way. These are bad jokes. All right. Yeah. I picked these out just for you. I got two of them for you. Cool. One, why does Freddy Krueger wear a hat?
I don't know.
He ran out of scare spray.
Okay.
Yep.
I get it.
Yep. Okay. And the second one is, what do Italians eat on Friday the 13th?
I feel like I should have guessed this one, but go for it.
Fettuccine Alfredo.
There you go.
Sorry, they're bad. I told you they were bad.
Yeah, no, they're there. I mean, well, it's funny. The reason why the title changed from Tropes to Scare Package was because in the 80s, they had these kind of cheesy, punny titles like Silent Night and Chopping Mall. So I was like, well, if the movie's about tropes, then the title has to be a trope.
No, I agree 100%. And
so Scare Package,
the cover art is perfect for an 80s homage type of love letter movie. So
yeah, I'm really, really proud of that. It's very, very house homage.
Yeah.
And every tape is actually each segment that's in
right.
the movie.
I was impressed with the whole thing.
My favorite thing though was when I came up with the concept to do the movie within the movie within the movie. Because when you see when he's holding the tape and there's another tape inside that tape and inside that tape. So it's a lot of fun. Just lets you know like how meta and self-referential this is.
No, it is, but it's done in a way that adds, in my opinion, adds to rather than detracts. So
awesome.
Because sometimes meta can take you out of the movie. You still have to have a certain willing suspension of disbelief to enjoy the movie. So
completely.
Anyway, it sounds to me like you've been happy with the response to Scare Package. So I'm glad to hear that. And, I look forward to more. And, Scare Package is going to be one of those movies that I return to periodically and recommend to others. So thanks so much for such a fun movie.
No, that means the world. All we ever want to do is I just want to make something where somebody can have an escape and get away for a bit. And those are really, really weird times we're in right now. So if
yes,
Scare can be a fun 90 minutes for you, 97 minutes for you, that's great.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks again, Aaron. And I know you still have a lot of projects on your plate and a lot of hard work. So, best of luck with everything. And I look forward to seeing what Paper Street Pictures and yourself put out next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shane. Appreciate it.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.